my gosh, that's so much. I think I remember.
She was in the middle of an official royal visit. Cameras rolling, bodyguards positioned, hundreds of eyes watching her every single move. And then, Princess Catherine did something that stopped everyone dead in their tracks. She broke away from the schedule. She ignored the royal protocol. She walked straight through the crowd, past the barriers, past the handlers, past every unwritten rule in the royal playbook, and she threw her arms around an old man that nobody in that crowd could identify. Security tensed up. Staff froze. The crowd went completely silent. And then, every single person watching burst into tears. Who was this man? Why did the future Queen of England abandon every royal rule she has ever been trained to follow just to embrace him? And what did she whisper to him that made the moment go viral around the entire world? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to feel something deep in your chest. And I promise you, this story is unlike anything you have heard about Princess Catherine before. Welcome back, royal family. You are watching Royal Catherine News. I am your host, and today we are diving into one of the most talked about, most heart-melting moments in recent royal history. If you are new here, welcome. You picked the perfect video to start with. Hit that subscribe button right now because we cover the stories about Catherine that actually matter. Not the gossip, not the drama. The real human moments that remind us why we fell in love with her in the first place. And this is one of those moments, setting the scene. Let's set the stage because context is everything here. William and Catherine are on an official royal visit to Cornwall, one of the most historically rich, breathtakingly beautiful counties in all of England. Their destination on this particular day is the National Maritime Museum, a world-class institution dedicated to preserving Britain's seafaring history, its naval heroes, and the communities that have lived and breathed the ocean for centuries. Now, if you have ever watched a royal visit unfold, you know how these things work. Everything, and I mean everything, is planned down to the minute. There is a schedule, there is a route, there is a protocol for how long you stop at each exhibit, who you shake hands with, what you say and what you don't say. The advisors, communications staff, and security personnel who organize these visits spend weeks preparing every detail. Royals do not deviate. They do not wander. They do not make spontaneous decisions in the middle of a crowd. And Catherine, of all people, knows this better than almost anyone. She has been doing this for well over a decade. She is the future queen consort of the most famous monarchy in the world. Grace under pressure isn't just something Catherine displays. It is something she has mastered. On this day, the museum was buzzing. Volunteers, staff members, local dignitaries, all gathered, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The atmosphere was electric but controlled. Cameras everywhere. And Catherine, radiant as always, was moving through the museum beautifully, chatting with volunteers, admiring the exhibits, being perfectly Catherine. And then she stopped. Not a polite stop, not the kind of pause she makes when she decides to say a quick hello. This was a full stop, a moment of recognition so sudden and so powerful that her entire body language changed in an instant. Her eyes, always calm, always composed, lit up. Not a polite smile, not a gracious nod. Her face transformed, and without hesitation, without consulting anyone, without checking the schedule, without a single glance toward her security team, Catherine walked directly toward an older gentleman standing quietly among the volunteers. And she hugged him. Not a formal two-cheek air kiss, not a polite handshake with a warm squeeze. She pulled him into a full, genuine, warmth-of-your-whole-heart hug. The crowd around them went quiet. Security personnel exchanged glances. Staff members who had rehearsed every beat of this visit looked at each other in confusion. Because this was not in the plan. The question builds. Now pause for a second, because I want you to think about something before I reveal who this man is. How many people from your past do you think truly remember you? Not the people you stayed in touch with, not your close friends or family, but the people who were simply present during a formative chapter of your life, who showed up every day, gave you something valuable, and then quietly stepped out of the picture as you moved on. Think about your own childhood. Think about the hallways you walked through, the classrooms you sat in, the adults who patiently, day after day, tried to hand you something that would last longer than the lesson itself. Do you think any of them knew how much it stuck? Because here is what makes this moment so extraordinary. This reunion was not planned. This was not a PR opportunity. Nobody emailed ahead of time to say, someone special will be volunteering that day. This was organic, spontaneous, real. And for Catherine, a woman whose every public appearance is choreographed and documented and analyzed, a spontaneous emotional reaction is one of the rarest things in the world. So who could possibly cause it? Who is this man that made the future Queen of England forget, just for a moment, every rule she has ever been trained to follow? The reveal. His name is Jim Embry, not a duke, not a diplomat, not a celebrity or a politician. Jim Embry is a retired teacher. And on the day of Catherine's visit to the National Maritime Museum, he was there not as a VIP guest, but as a volunteer, an ordinary man giving his time to a museum he believed in. But to Catherine, Jim Embry is anything but ordinary. Because more than 25 years ago, Jim Embry was Princess Catherine's history teacher at St. Andrew's School, her prep school in Pangbourne, Berkshire, where a young Kate Middleton was just beginning to discover the world around her. Let that sink in for a moment. Catherine was just a little girl, probably wearing her school uniform, sitting in a classroom with her books open, her pen ready, listening to this man explain the stories of the past. She had no idea that one day she would be history. She had no idea that the world's cameras would one day follow her every step. She was just a student, and he was just her teacher, and they shared a classroom and a season of learning that apparently left a mark that time never erased. 25 years passed. Catherine grew up. She went to university. She met a prince. She became a duchess. She became a mother. She became one of the most photographed women on the planet. She navigated a cancer diagnosis with more grace and courage than most of us could imagine. She emerged as the Princess of Wales. And Jim Embry? He retired. He volunteered at a museum he loved. He lived his quiet life. And on the day William and Catherine came to Cornwall, Jim Embry was just another volunteer standing in the crowd, with absolutely no expectation that the woman he once taught history to would recognize him, let alone remember his name. Can you imagine what that felt like? Standing there in your volunteer lanyard, watching the Princess of Wales move through the gallery, and then suddenly realizing she is walking toward you? What she said. But here is where the story moves from sweet to absolutely extraordinary. Because Catherine didn't just hug him and move on. She didn't give him a quick squeeze and a polite, "How lovely to see you," and continue with her schedule. She held his arms. She looked at him. She stayed in that moment. And then she said something that tells us more about who Princess Catherine really is than almost anything else we have ever seen from her. She told Jim Embry, "The things you taught me, I now teach to my children." Read that again. "The things you taught me, I now teach to my children." Think about what is hidden inside those words. Jim Embry stood in front of a classroom. He taught history to a little girl named Kate Middleton. And now, decades later, the lessons he gave her, his passion for the subject, his way of bringing the past to life, his belief that understanding where we come from helps us know who we are. Those lessons are being passed down again, to Prince George, to Princess Charlotte, to Prince Louis. Jim Embry didn't just teach Catherine. Through Catherine, he is teaching the future King of England. And he had no idea. Because this is the thing about great teachers that we so rarely stop to acknowledge. They don't just fill your head with information for an exam. They shape the way you see the world. They hand you a lens. And sometimes, if they're truly exceptional, you carry that lens with you for the rest of your life. You look through it as an adult. You hand it to your own children. And you never quite forget the person who gave it to you. Jim Embry is that person for Catherine. And in a crowded museum in Cornwall with cameras rolling and a tight schedule ticking, she made sure he knew it. Now, here's something I want you to think about while we continue. Is there a teacher in your own life who gave you something like that? Drop their name in the comments. Let's honor some incredible teachers today, because if Catherine can do it in front of the whole world, we can do it right here. Jim Embry's reaction. Now let's talk about what happened after. Because Jim Embry's response to the whole thing is just as moving as Catherine's hug itself. After the visit, reporters tracked him down. The internet was already ablaze with footage and photographs. Journalists wanted to know, who is this man? What does he think? How does it feel to be embraced by the Princess of Wales in front of the world? And Jim Embry, in the most beautifully understated way, gave an answer that tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man he is. He said Catherine hadn't changed at all, that she is just as lovely and kind today as she was 25 years ago. No fanfare, no hyperbole, just a quiet, genuine observation from a man who knew her before the crown, before the cameras, before the entire world decided she was someone to watch. He remembered the little girl, and in the woman he hugged that day, he still saw her. Think about what that means in the context of everything Catherine has been through. The scrutiny, the tabloid pressure, the years of navigating a life lived almost entirely in public, the health challenges, the grief, the constant performance of being one of the most watched people on earth. And through all of it, according to the man who knew her before any of it began, she remained exactly the same. That is not a small thing. That is remarkable. That is character. That is who Catherine of Wales actually is when you strip away the titles and the tiaras and the state occasions. She is a woman who hugs her old teachers in the middle of a crowd. She is a woman who remembers the people who shaped her. She is a woman who, in the words of someone who knew her as a child, hasn't changed at all. Why this moment went viral? Now let's talk about the cultural moment this created, because this wasn't just a sweet personal story. This went viral, globally. Within hours, outlets from London to Los Angeles were covering it. Social media flooded with reactions. Comment sections filled with people saying, "This is why I love her, and she's so real." And let's be honest, a lot of people saying, "I'm not crying, you're crying." But why? Why did this particular moment capture the world's attention so completely? I think it comes down to something very simple and very powerful. We live in a world obsessed with status, with hierarchy, with the performance of importance, and nowhere is that more visible than in the world of royal protocol, a system of rules and traditions maintained for centuries to communicate power, order, and dignity. Royals do not break protocol. They do not abandon their schedule. They do not sprint across a room to hug a volunteer because they recognized a familiar face. Except Catherine did. And in doing so, she communicated something that no press release, no carefully crafted speech, no state occasion could ever convey as effectively. She communicated that people matter more than protocol, that the man who taught her history 25 years ago matters more than the schedule, that remembering where you came from matters more than maintaining the performance of where you have arrived. That warmth, genuine, spontaneous, uncalculated warmth, is not incompatible with greatness. In fact, it might be the definition of it. In a world deeply hungry for authenticity, especially from people in positions of power, Catherine handed us a moment of complete, unscripted truth, and the world responded the way it always responds to truth. With tears, with shares, with the feeling that something important just happened. What this tells us about Catherine. There is a version of this story where Catherine doesn't stop, where she clocks Jim Embry in the crowd, feels a flicker of recognition, and makes the calculation that stopping would throw off the schedule and complicate things. There is a version where she gives him a polite smile from a distance and keeps moving. But that is not the version that happened, because Catherine has always chosen the human moment over the performative one. Think back through the years. Think about the way she crouches down to speak to children at eye level, the way she engages with people at mental health events not as a patron making an obligatory appearance, but as someone genuinely, deeply interested in what they have to say. Think about the courage it took to step in front of cameras after her cancer diagnosis and speak with that level of honesty and vulnerability. Catherine has never been a royal who hides behind the title. She has always been a person who happens to carry one. And Jim Embry's hug is the latest, most beautiful expression of that truth. She saw someone who mattered to her. She went to him. She held him. She told him his work had echoed forward through time into the lives of a future king and his siblings. You cannot fake that. That comes from a person who genuinely understands that who we become is never entirely our own doing. We are always, in part, the product of someone else's patience and belief and love. For Catherine, one of those people was Jim Embry. The power of teachers. And this brings me to something I want to linger on, because it deserves more than a passing mention. Teachers. We talk about them in sentimental terms. Teacher Appreciation Week, end-of-year cards, inspirational quotes on coffee mugs. But do we truly reckon with the weight of influence a single teacher can carry? Jim Embry stood in front of a classroom and did his job. He taught history. He probably marked papers and ran lessons and explained timelines and events and the significance of things that happened long before any of his students were born. He probably had good days and hard days. He probably wondered, the way all teachers wonder, whether any of it was really landing. It was. My goodness, it was. It landed so deeply in one little girl that 25 years later, when she was one of the most powerful women in the world, standing in a public space surrounded by security and cameras, she ran to him. She held him. She credited him with something she now gives her own children. How many Jim Embrys are out there right now? How many teachers are standing in front of classrooms doing their quiet, essential, undervalued work, having no idea what seeds they are planting? How many will never know? That is the part of this story that quietly breaks my heart and puts it back together at the same time. Jim Embry got to know. He got to hear from the woman he taught that his work mattered, that it carried forward, that it lives on. Not every teacher gets that, but Catherine gave it to him. And by sharing it with the world, she gave it to every teacher who has ever wondered whether any of it was worth it. It is. It always is. St. Andrew's School and Catherine's early years. Let me give you a little more context about where this story began, because understanding Catherine's childhood helps you understand why this moment was so deeply meaningful. St. Andrew's School in Pangbourne, Berkshire is a prestigious prep school where traditions run deep and the relationships between teachers and students are often formative in ways that outlast the school years themselves. Catherine has consistently demonstrated a deep respect for education, through her own pursuit of it and through the initiatives she has championed as a Royal. Her Royal Foundation's work in early childhood development is rooted in her genuine belief that the earliest years of a child's life and the quality of the adults around them during those years shape everything that follows. That belief did not come from a policy paper. It came from lived experience, from classrooms and teachers and moments of learning that stuck. And when she told Jim Embry, "The things you taught me, I now teach to my children," she wasn't just honoring him personally. She was making a statement about the entire philosophy that drives her public work. Education is not transactional. It is generational. It echoes. Jim Embry's classroom is part of that echo. George, Charlotte, and Louis. And speaking of generations, let's talk about the Wales children for a moment, because they are the next chapter of this story, whether they know it or not. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis are growing up in a household shaped by a mother who deeply values education, history, and the human connections that make learning meaningful. They are not just future royals in training. They are children being raised by a woman who still remembers her prep school history teacher by name. Imagine Prince George sitting at the kitchen table while Catherine explains something about British history, a battle, a monarch, the significance of the sea to the island nation he will one day help lead. And woven into that lesson, perhaps without even explicitly saying it, is the spirit of Jim Embry, his approach, his passion, his way of making the past feel alive. Jim Embry taught one girl. That girl is teaching 3 children. One of those children will be king. The ripple effect of a single teacher's dedication, playing out across generations, across the very future of the British monarchy. If that doesn't move you, I genuinely don't know what will. People's Princess. The phrase "People's Princess" carries enormous weight in the context of the British royal family. It was most associated with Princess Diana, a woman who, like Catherine, had an extraordinary gift for genuine human connection, who broke protocol not out of recklessness but out of compassion, who saw people, really saw them, in a way that made them feel less invisible. Catherine has never sought that comparison. She has always been careful to honor Diana's memory without appropriating it. But moments like this one make it impossible not to see the thread connecting them. Because what Catherine did in that museum in Cornwall is precisely what made Diana so beloved. She chose the person over the protocol. She chose warmth over formality. She chose the authentic, human moment over the performance of royalty, and the world responded with overwhelming love. Catherine is her own person, her own princess, her own kind of royal. But in moments like this, she carries forward something deeply important, a reminder that the most powerful thing a royal can do is simply be human. Genuinely, unguardedly, wholeheartedly human. Jim Embry got the full force of that humanity on an afternoon in Cornwall, and the rest of us got to watch. Okay, I want to hear from you now. Truly, this story is about so much more than a hug. It is about memory and gratitude, and the way the right people at the right time can plant something in us that lasts a lifetime. So here are my questions for you today, and I am going to be reading every single comment. First, do you have a teacher like Jim Embry? Someone from your past who taught you something you still carry? Someone who never knew how much they gave you? Tell me their name. Tell me what they gave you. Let's honor them right here, right now. Second, if you could hug one person from your past the way Catherine hugged Jim Embry, just walk up to them in the middle of a normal day and let them know they mattered, who would it be? And third, what does this moment tell you about Princess Catherine? Does it change how you see her? I want your honest thoughts. Drop everything in the comments. This community is one of the warmest corners of the internet, and moments like this one deserve a real conversation. Wider significance. Before we wrap up, I want to take one more step back, because this story matters beyond the royal world. We are living through a moment in history where trust in institutions is at historic lows. People are skeptical, tired of performance, hungry for something that feels real. And royals, perhaps more than anyone else in the public eye, are surrounded by the machinery of performance. Every appearance managed, every statement drafted, every interaction curated. Which is why moments of genuine spontaneity, like Catherine walking through a crowd and seeing her old teacher and simply going to him, land with such extraordinary force. Because you cannot manufacture that. You cannot plan it. It either happens or it doesn't. And it either comes from genuine feeling or it doesn't. This one did, and people sensed it immediately. That is why it went viral. Not because someone shared a press release or a royal account posted strategically, but because real footage of a real moment of real human connection spread organically from person to person across the globe, carried on nothing but the force of its own authenticity. In a world starving for real, Catherine gave us real, and Jim Embry, quietly, unknowingly, was the catalyst. So, to answer the question we started with, who is the old man Princess Catherine suddenly hugged and broke all security protocols for? He is Jim Embry, history teacher, retiree, volunteer, a man who spent his career giving young minds a window into the past, and who, in one ordinary lesson in one ordinary classroom more than 25 years ago, gave a little girl something she carries to this day. He is not famous. He holds no title. He commands no army. But he shaped a queen. And a queen, in front of the whole world, made sure he knew it. That is the story of Princess Catherine and Jim Embry. A story about teachers and students, about memory and gratitude, about the quiet but enormous impact of people who choose, every single day, to show up and give young minds something worth keeping. And it is a story about Catherine, the woman behind the crown, the girl who never forgot her history teacher, the mother who passes his lessons to her children, the princess who, in the middle of a royal visit with the world watching, chose to be exactly, completely, wonderfully herself. If this story moved you, and I truly hope it did, please give it a thumbs up. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love and appreciate Princess Catherine the way we do. Subscribe to Royal Catherine News if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you are always first to know when we post. We cover the moments that matter, the real ones, the human ones, the ones that remind us why we care. And leave me a comment. Tell me about your Jim Embry. Tell me about the person who shaped you. Tell me what you think of our incredible Princess of Wales. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and never forget to thank the teachers in your life before 25 years go by. See you in the next one.